Hello, my monstrosities. Hello once again. Today I bring to you a Synaptic Nexus video. I'm sorry that if my audio sounds off, I'm in a new spot for the time being, and I don't really know how audio is going to do for videos right now. So I apologize for how this might sound compared to my usual videos. But with that, I did want to talk again about Synaptic Nexus. I know there's been um, a lot of things going on, and the last Tyranids video I covered, or I think the last video on this channel, is discussing where Synaptic Nexus left off, and how it had literally the worst win rate of our detachments, of the detachments being played. That, again, yeah, and I said, yeah, hey, this is actually probably worse than Warrior Bioform Onslaught now, and it turned out to be true. So, going on from that, I wanted to talk about some other things to see if this might affect Synaptic Nexus at all. I'll be honest, I'm not sure what Synaptic Nexus can turn into if GW continues down continues down this path of just releasing new rules and only changing things that would affect the new things compared to going back and fixing old detachments. I'm not too much of a fan of that aspect because they should have enough people to do both, but no, neither here nor there. So let's get into kind of everything right now for a bit. So Synaptic Nexus is the detachment that you do have to ask yourself, why am I not playing Invasion Fleet? But seriously though, it is supposed to be synaptic imperatives coming out from the leader beast. One turn you get a 5-up invuln for everybody in synapse range. One turn you get +1 to advance and charge rolls made for this unit. +1 to melee, sorry, +1 to hit for melee attacks on another turn, right? The enhancements, I'm still, uh, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. It's because they don't always, in my opinion, have a use every game, right? Except for, of course, Power of the Hive Mind, that's just a stat stick buff, but some games your opponent will never be trying to deep strike within a foot of one bear. They deploy all on the line and they charge at your face. Sometimes Synaptic Control effectively does nothing because it's -1 from the damage, but if it's a billion attacks and it can't go lower, what does it do? And the Dirge Heart of Kharas is okay, but that only really applies to when they're making Battle Shock tests, or hey, I guess if you're going into CSM, you can make it easier for them to fail their Dark Packs. So there's that. Stratagems. Smothering Shadow is still something to be desired. I actually was trying to put together a video of if High Fleet Chronos were to be our next detachment. I'm like, yeah, and, well, this part got scrapped obviously because I'm talking about it now. But it's like, yeah, if that's going to be like the shooting detachment and more psychic power detachment, need more synapse because that's like what Chronos does, is range to go against chaos, yada yada yada. We need grenade. And then I remembered, oh right, they tried to give us grenade in the worst way possible because they've given us the core stretch we're missing out on in ways and detachments. We miss out on tank shock, they give it to us in Crusher Stampede. We miss out on grenade, they give it to us in Synaptic Nexus. So kind of things like that. And they kind of just said you don't get smoke because you have venom throws, and did it kind of that way. So to that point, the Smothering Shadow would be better if it didn't require a unit to fail a Battle Shock test. Now, how do you balance that? I mean, hey, look, they found a way for demons to have grenades, specifically Corn demons, right? They found a way to do that, so it would be interesting if they get around to coming to this and go, hey, it's just one unit within 12 inches of a synapse unit from you or whatever, right? They do it that way. That's cool. Reinforced hive node. Now, my chief complaint with it is that, hey, we got caught in the crossfire for effectively trying to tackle Space Marines. And then they gave them +1 to wound while using Gilliman. That's two targets, and we've talked about that enough. But not only that, you have something that's better and Art as Nails. I mean, I guess you could argue there's instances where it's not better, but Art as Nails for orcs that still goes for like the phase. So that could be touched on. Synaptic channeling, I would just prefer it. I've talked about a lot of what I would like to see from this detachment, so I guess I'll speed this up. But synaptic channeling can be different. Um, I saw. I think I've talked about this, but Rasta OG, you commented on the last one a good point about imperative dominance. That if you were able to stack them, then I wouldn't feel so shitty about advance and charge and the hit, because that was one of my main complaints in the fact that you broke down the wall, and the reason the wall works is because you're trying to put all of this together. I have no reason to have +1 to advance and charge if I can't advance and charge. And then when I get to melee, I'm still hitting on 4s and 3s. I would rather be hitting on 2s and 3s, right? So, uh, that's what imperative dominance could be. Irresistible will is fine. I still think that the range limit can be taken out because we're past that in the game. We really are. There's a lot of rerolls, a lot of shenaniganizing. I think you could just give this a straight damage boost and override instincts. We still need fallback, shoot and charge. Really, I would love if that was up here, right? Like one turn, all your units get fallback, shoot and charge. And then this became 1 CP advance and charge, right? That's what I would like, but there's that. So, Synaptic Nexus, those are what I would like to see from it. But moving past that, let's talk about the things that are going on with the faction. We have Norns coming out to play. Norns are finally seeing play at their points. Um, as a Norn apologist, I like it. And the reason I'm bringing this up in terms of Synaptic Nexus is because that's where we first really tried Norn spam. Now, going over here, we've seen Norns come out and Crusher Stampede, and I'm glad that that has finally happened. I'm glad it has finally happened. Um, this is this is needless. I'm going to try to put this in a nicer way, instead of just seeming to be needlessly petty. But this is why I make certain videos talking about where they still have applications, right? Because I know way too many Tyranid players and people have even like said it, and it's just like, yeah, there's no reason to put a Norn in Cursor Stampede when even GW themselves, when they first released the Norns, they were like, yeah, you might want to try these in Crusher. And then now that we finally learned what Crusher does, I'm so glad we made it there as a community. You can do more than just go through the walls. When you're auto exploding D6 3 times in a match, when everything goes wrong, when they finally lift you off the point, and you're retaining +1 to hit, and +1 to wound, so you're undoing the damage part. You're still hitting on 2s pretty much no matter what's going on. You can get through stealth and -1 to hit. It's interesting in the fact that they always had play there. They always had play there. If you take 3 things that can have 15 OC, right? You get there, and now you are at least playing that game. And to another point, this is way over, way out of date, but um, it is kind of funny to see where this lies, where it's important to remember that Norns, like I've kind of tried to tote them for a while, they will still just score you points. You're either getting points on primary, or if you put them in a terrain feature over there, they can still do whatever you kind of need them to do well, yeah, being a 260 point paperweight for some things, but you know, it's kind of funny where we're finally moving away from, hey, I need to take a million tiny pieces to do actions and things. Well, we don't do that everywhere. I'm so glad we're getting there. We're getting there. But what does that have to do with Synaptic Nexus? Well, if Norns can see play in Crusher Stampede, where previously nobody saw their value, I think that Norns can see play in Synaptic Nexus, where that was they first found value. Um, to the point, and a lot of it did come down to reinforced Hive node. And there was another comment. Let's see if I can find that real quick. Sorry, I didn't think to get this far. Um, SC GF8SG did bring up a good point that I recently saw, in that it did help with last cannons. It did help with last cannons and feel you less bad, help you feel less bad about last cannons affecting your Norn. And those last cannons can be on as simple, just simple things. And now that we're seeing Predator Destructors and Predator Annihilators, Predator Destructor Annihilators, Predator Destructors, whatever, um, get the same points hike as we did with the Exocrine, there might be one less enlist, and I highly doubt that, but there's a chance there. But to that same point, now you don't lose a Norn, or with previous reinforced Hive note, you weren't just losing a Norn to two Predator Destructors that were still eating up your infantry, right? So, um, that's where that kind of had more power. And now, what with what reinforced Hive node is doing now, I'll be honest, I'm not sure, because will it be good for a unit to be a bit more survivable in one combat? That is undeniably true, right? That is literally that. There's no way you could say that you would be better off without it, in the case of not factoring in vulnerable saves, right? Like, unless you're completely wasting it, where somebody has AP3, ignore cover, AP3 in melee, and you have a 4 up in vuln, right? Whatever. If you're using it as it is intended, you will always be more durable. However, the problem for us becomes we need better targets for it, right? We need better targets for reinforced Hive node, and to that, I want to plant a seed. I haven't had time to experiment with this, but one of my thinkings is that instead of trying to double down on the thing that, hey, in Crusher Stampede, the Norn emissary has nothing to keep it alive outside of the fight phase, right? Because there is Savage Roar, but by that point, it's fine usually. Um, that's usually the shooting aspect to get to your point that you have to worry about. But to that end, if a Norn emissary can survive, has been my main gripe with using Norn spam in Synaptic Nexus. If a Norn emissary can survive in Crusher Stampede, right, it should be able to survive in Synaptic Nexus all the same, with about the same amount of worth of survivability capabilities. So, I've always been more fond of using Reinforced Hive Node for units that your opponent doesn't expect to survive. And to this case, I touted that for Warriors for a bit, and I just Warriors, man. But seriously though, I think this, because again, it has to go to a Synapse unit. Maliceptor already has a 3 up and then a 4 up. So like, what's the wiggle room we're doing there? Um, that's why it's always been my thing with Maliceptor and Norn emissaries. Like, you're already going to the 4 up invuln. I think at a certain point, it might save you one more damage, and yeah, that's always good, but the averages. I think it's time that we look into actual Norn spam. Like, genuinely, 6 of them on the fucking table. Because we've seen the Norn Assimilator. Now, to that end, primarily has been back into Assimilation Swarm because it has Harvester, and that's where it more or less shines. It has the ability to regenerate in there, and the main thing that has always been against the Norn Assimilator compared to the Emissary is that it doesn't have an invuln. But in this detachment, it does find kind of a unique purpose where your opponent will shoot into things that are Turvagon, which is also the same profile. The 11, 2 up save, 16 wounds, right? Um, or she might have 14, but still a Synapse and no invuln, but T11, 2 up save. They'll shoot into her and then find out that it's not the easiest thing to get rid of. For most armies, right? Now, if they make the oath and do the woo up, the bam, yeah, but to that, it takes more investment. So, reinforced hive node, I find, is when you have that situation of them not really knowing how much they have to put into it. Make it so that your opponent that thought that they could just put in the one tank into the no invuln Norn assimilator. Yeah, guess what, friend? You needed a second one, right? But that's from when I did still mess around with Synaptic Nexus on that ideology. So I'd have to come back to seeing how that plays out, and I don't know when I'll have time to do that right now. But we've seen, because of the points drops, Norn Emissaries and Norn Assimilator come back, and I understand once again, the Norn Assimilator is primarily in Assimilation Swarm when being used. There was one funny list, I forget what event that was. But there was a list that said, "Yeah, I'm using a Norn." No, the other one. And that was pretty funny. I don't remember how they did, but to that point, I believe that was Invasion Fleet. So people are willing to experiment with them a little bit more. And with the Norn Assimilator, with Harpooned, you get +2 to charge, and then you throw in another one. You're now making some pretty decent charge rolls, right? So it's worth trying. Going on, the Neurolictor saw a 10-point decrease, and kind of a bread and butter of Synaptic Nexus for a time as well, because not only if you fail the Battle Shock test, you are now +1 to wound, but you risk Smothering Shadow, or rather, the opponent risks this. So, triggering test for Smothering Shadow is not a thing that we haven't tried, but now that it's cheaper, it might be worth to reinvest this thing. And then, here's the other one, right? I can't say I've seen a lot of incorporating both Norns and Neurolictors in the same list because a lot of people view that as too expensive. And I myself, I don't think I might have tried that more than once. Even though I like both, and I pretty much always included Norn in my list, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I don't think I've experimented with that. So the same way that you have people walking Maliceptors up with Norn Emissary so that it's -1 to hit, and then you're trying to get through a Norn Emissary, um, you now have to you now have to juggle, possibly because we're going into Synaptic Nexus that has cheaper Synapse units. There might be room to experiment with Neurolictor on points, Norn Emissary, and Maliceptor. And yeah, that's a different stack and bulks and whatever, but points wise, it's also painful. And again, to the points, a point that a unit I don't have up on the tabs, just thinking about it now, the Exocrine did go up 5 points, and the Tyrannifex did go up 10. So I imagine more people are going to be looking to take out something along the line, and if you go from a 200-point Tyrannifex down to a Maliceptor or two, I think that there's a argument to try this points one, and specifically because we're playing Synaptic Nexus, Irresistible Will might give you what you're missing if you were to drop an exocrine or two. I say that with caution, uh, because this is something that I used to enjoy, again, back when I was given Synaptic Nexus the time of day, is that, well, do I need this many exocrines if my Maliceptor that has an 18-inch gun has to be up here anyway? I could just fire onto this one target anyway, because it's the same shooting lines, different range, right? You have to still play the same way, essentially. You put an exocrine, you have to make sure that if you want the reroll ones to hit in range, something else has to be able to hit that target in range. So you're playing the same game, now mind you. Um, with Irresistible Will, it's more difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is more difficult because it has to be within 6 inches of the synapse unit triggering the irresistible will, compared to with an exocrine, um, whatever the target is that got fired into, no matter where you are on the board, you could shoot on from it. So if you're coming off the board from reserves and shooting into the target that got shot by the exocrine, you're still getting those rerolls, right? So it is something, but the other thing with irresistible, well, it's your shooting or the fight phase. So shooting phase, maybe it went a little bit funky, didn't give you too many angles, or maybe you just didn't get your resource that you wanted. Still got the fight phase to try to figure it out, really. So with Maliceptor, Norns being more appealing and Neurolictors being more appealing, there's a chance. Also, you all called me crazy about a year ago. You all called me crazy about a year ago where the only unit that I enjoy that is not a monster in Crusher Stampede is the Neurolictor. And I just want to say, I didn't find that video. Look at that. Crusher Stampede, two Neurolictors, and a Norn. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Hive minds think alike. Okay, so thank you, Sam Pope, for proving me a little less crazy. Like you already were getting +1 to hit. You might as well go for the +1 to wound on some things and get some synapse and then give you +1 strength to your +1 to hit. Either way, I digress. This isn't a Crusher Stampede video. This is a Synaptic Nexus video. So the TLDR on those first three is they're all cheaper. They're all cheaper. They're all cheaper. You might as well play around with the points and see if there's a list. I'll be trying to play around the points and when I get the chance, see where that lands us. But past that, Hive Tyrant also got cheaper. It gives you assault. You have something that gives you +1 to the advance. You might as well try, right? Now, and to that extent, the problem with this is, yeah, the Hive Tyrant is cheaper, but you're still at the point where you have something that does not want to be exposed. So my problem with it having assault innately is that you kind of just have to hope that this +1 advance, right, is then going to give you bang for your buck, still within the Hive Tyrant range because and that's the other thing, you probably want to move the Hive Tyrant first. See where the Hive Tyrant lands, and then yeah, you can shoot down. There's a lot, right? But at the end of the day, the Hive Tyrant is a Synapse unit that got cheaper and is a character, so it can take something like Psychostatic Disruption or Synaptic Control to possibly help it stay alive. I will say the number crunching on that one doesn't usually favor it. If if being honest, right, it doesn't usually favor it because of the way that it's going, right? If your opponent is going into the Hive Tyrant, uh, and they have a couple of attacks, you have to really consider what is trying to hit a T10 monster, right? It's probably something that can hit T10, and if it's damage 3, uh, it takes 4 shots to take it out. Now, if you can take that down to damage 2, it takes 5, right? It does have to take 5 successful wounds, but 20 points for one more die. How often, while taking this route of exposing the Hive Tyrant because you're trying to benefit from the assault and the advance, how often is the one extra die really going to save you? It becomes a conversation. Now, to that end, um, psychostatic disruption is slightly more appealing because you can at least try to like screen out yourself, I guess, is the way, instead of getting dropped on by uh I don't even remember what the bridgehead equivalence thing is right now. Sorry, I'm blanking. But instead of getting dropped on by something that can uh do quite a bit of damage to a hive tyrant, maybe you go that route. That's probably safer for now, but it is 30 points. So you're kind of back to what you've been paying for the hive tyrant. Well, more so by going to now 255 points for a Hive Tyrant to do this. So, I don't know. I still have to play with it. I'm still getting a feel for it. Full disclosure, I've not been on the Synaptic Nexus game trying things lately. This is all just a discussion on the fact of um, how points have come down, and I didn't really give it the time of day when I made my how I feel about the changes situation because primarily primarily, I'm happy about where Vanguard Onslaught can go. That's what I'm happy about. So we'll have to see to that front. Now going on, the Neurotyrant. Why is the Neurotyrant in this conversation when it's always been a part of people's Synaptic Nexus list? Well, people are finding it more desirable in general. The Neuraloids giving out synapse to effectively keep you together for Synaptic Nexus is fine, but just people have been trying Neurotyrant and the Zoes more often now. Um, oh, I'm not completely against it because I have been. I'm not even going to act like I haven't been. I've made many a video where I say I don't particularly love the think tank in Synaptic Nexus because the only thing that you're benefiting from is fall back and shoot. When you're probably in a position that you shouldn't have been in with your Zoes. And asking that to be your only anti tank makes things difficult. Now, however, this all again changes when we can have the discussion of including Norns because of their points now and what they're getting for us, right? Um, if you're including Norns, there is access to a Melta on the Emissary, and the Norn Assimilator kind of specializes in beating the brakes off of monsters and vehicles, or that's what it's supposed to. How often it does that is another discussion. But because you don't necessarily have to rely on the Zoe's firing power for the last cannon shots, there's a discussion about seriously using this more often, right? Because you have it in other places. You have strength 12 in other places, end of the day, right? And in better positions. This is all getting expensive, I know. But we might have finally reached a point where the identity of Synaptic Nexus can come through. I believe the thing they were going through was this is your elite detachment. That's what I believe they were going for. Where you were going to be taking elites, because our synapse is usually the elites, right? This is you're taking them. Whatever you take around them has buffs. You get to be elite, do some elite things such as grenade, -1 AP, rerolls, right? Fallback can charge. Those are elite level things. We'll have to see. We will have to see. We will have to see. And the other thing that puts this particular unit for 305 points back on my radar on Synaptic Nexus, the Tyrant effects got bumped up 10 points. Now, I don't love this. I don't. But again, if we're now taking Norns, it is worth the fact, or the discussion, I guess, to bring the Norns back, completely drop Tyrant effects, is because now I have the defensive profile, and between Zoe's and the Norns, I have the offensive profile. The Rupture Cannon is 2 shots with much better range, much better AP, and at least 7 damage when it happens. But if it's going to be 200 points, and I'm taking the Neurotyrant anyway, there's a chance. There's a chance. There's a chance. And if I'm taking the Neurotyrant, I can at least attach a Flamer and then play more aggressively. There's a chance for all of this. So while I don't love how Tyrannifexes have been, punished along with everybody else's anti-tank, if everybody else is anti-tank except somehow Ultramarines, plus one to wound, whatever, um, I'm being salty. But if everybody else's also gets addressed, there's a chance that some of our bigger things starts to survive more. And that's kind of why I still figured that Crusher would be okay, because it's still a stat check, right? And you don't just have to use a stat check in one particular detachment. It will lend itself well, but a stat check that is in um, Crusher Stampede will still be a stat check in Invasion Fleet in a different way. I'm trading off getting damage output while you're trying to figure out how you're going to get through several T11 and T10 profiles. And I'm getting plus one to hit, possibly plus one to wound. Over Invasion Fleet, I'm getting 5 up invuln. Sorry, 5 up Feel No Pain. And Synaptic Nexus, that might be a 5 up invuln on the things that definitely don't have any invuln. That could be minus 1 AP on the things, So if you're still taking the same level of list, and that's where Synaptic Nexus for a time was a better Crusher Monster Mass list than Crusher Stampede was. Now, that's the prevailing opinion. Do I necessarily agree with that? Um, there was a lot that went into it, so I don't know how I particularly feel on that front, to be honest, because I saw the vision with with Crusher. Um, I saw the vision. The main thing that put it over the edge for me is how they affected the go through walls. Like when they implemented that a little bit better, then it's like, all right, clearly Crusher is just better now. But before that, I don't know. I've talked about it a lot of times. People have been using tanks and monsters on the table for a while. We've always found ways to get them into their positions, so it's not like it's so incredibly unruly for it to not to be. But so to that point in Synaptic Nexus, if that turns out to be a plus one advance for one turn for several monsters, um, anything helps. Anything helps, I guess. Would I like it to be other things? Of course, but it is where it lands. So Tyrannifex going up makes Zoe's more appealing because now it's 200 for 200. And it's not necessarily that they're more appealing because I still wouldn't tell you to throw Zoe's in every list compared to Tyrannifex, but in things like Vanguard Onslaught, I will. Um, and Synaptic Nexus, the jury's still out. I'm still cranking on that one. But for Assimilation Swarm, I will tell you that. Is there any other one that I might tell you that for that I'm blanking on? No, I think that's it. I wouldn't tell you that for Crusher. Unending, I probably would, to be honest. Because they give the 6-inch, 6 up invuln. Assimilation Swarm, I would. Vanguard Onslaught, I would. Synaptic Nexus, maybe. We have to see how the rest of this edition plays out. But, because Tyrannifex went up, Zoe's. This was the clear winner. These are our only hope for a while. Having both of these and then going again back to cheaper Neurolectors. Maybe. Maybe. So, there's that. Moving on to different units that we're just seeing an uptick on. Hormagaunts. Finally, finally, finally. The little raptor buddies are getting their love. I don't know how many times I've said it. I've always liked them better than the gargoyles and the termagants. What do I mean they're finally getting their love? Well, let's look over here to what happened in Invasion Fleet this past weekend. Finally. Finally. Now I understand. In Invasion Fleet, you can respawn the Hormagaunts. Did we do that last weekend here? We did? Okay. What about here? Here. We're finally getting to the point where we are understanding that Hormagaunts are good. But why do I care so much about that in Synaptic Nexus? They have advance and charge. They are our only unit in the Codex that gets it without needing to be in Vanguard Onslaught or having an enhancement in Warrior Bioform Onslaught. Hormagaunts getting +1 to advance and +1 to charge means that they get an additional 2 inches of movement for that turn, taking them up to 12 inches, and because this all is relying on you being within Synapse, now mind you, you just have to be in Synapse when you make those rolls, so technically you can do it on the advance, get +1, and then fall out of it for the charge. But the whole entire idea of this detachment is you are staying in Synapse. Like that's what it's asking you for. So if there was to be a unit to be rewarded for that, it's the Hormagaunts. 5 up invuln, guess what? You're safe. You're never getting worse than it. And when your opponent thinks that they were just going to lift Hormagaunts and they don't do it, cheap Hormagaunts that have advance and charge, they get stuck in places. You need fast units to do the things. I admittedly probably should have. Admittedly, probably. Good job, Monster. We're speaking. Goodness, excellent at this point in the video. Um, but you know, when your opponent is now stuck in with a bunch of tiny bodies, you have access to fallback, shoot, and charge on synapse units, or sorry, a unit within synapse range. Um, there's a lot that you can do by just clogging your opponent up with now 5 up invuln Hormagaunts that got there faster than they imagined, and for a turn, hit harder or hit more often than they imagined because they're going to threes, right? So if we can transition some of that Hormagaunt love over to Synaptic Nexus, again, I'm just saying, it's all coming up Millhouse. Um, maybe, and I guess I also have to expose my own hypocrisy here. As we've seen with this conversation, I'm talking about a lot of units that I've already liked, but yet I haven't found myself going back to Synaptic Nexus to see if there's hope. So throw your eggs at me and your tomatoes at me for not trying this myself lately. But I guess there are brighter horizons on this front. Uh, Trigon is now 140 points. Guess what else is 140 points? The Exocrine. So yes, I did say you can just drop the Exocrine in Synaptic Nexus if you're so bold. The Trigon being the same amount of points, maybe you don't take multiple of them like I would advocate for in Vanguard Onslaught, but having one that is now hitting on 2, strength 10, +1 to advance to charge, whatever, 5 up invuln, the Trigon looks more appealing too. Now, the struggle with all of that part though is trying to maintain the Trigon in Synapse range. So, to that end, I don't know if you still take the Hive to the Walkrent, or do you try the Flyrant? I know. I'm going to get it. I used the Parasite of Mortrix. I used it one time, it was amazing. Okay? I get it. But before we go that far, I would like to remind everybody, while I like the Hormagaunts best, gargoyles still exist. They don't have synapse, but they attach to a synapse creature, which is the Winged Tyrant Prime. So, one thing that I talked about for a while, when everybody's like, yeah, worry about from Onslaught, just attach a Winged Prime to gargoyles, and now you have a brick of a 5 up invuln. And I'm like, but we could have done that. We've been able to do that. Now mind you, outside of just the one turn, but we've had access to that. So again, this is all I didn't make a draft list when coming to this discussion. This is just what could happen. Um, if we take the fact that the Winged Tyrant Prime gargoyles have a 5 up invuln for a turn, right? Get a good block of them in there, piss people off. Maybe you put the Dirge out of Cars on your Winged Tyrant Prime. That way, when everything's going south, Um, or whenever it's better for you. It doesn't have to be going south. Pop, Shadow in the Warp, Neurotyrant, all the things, right? But I say all that to say it has Deep Strike. You need a Deep Strike in Synapse probably to help you with the Trigon situation. It's probably what needs to happen. And the Trigon looks more appealing to at least me now as a melee beat stick for 140 points. That is damage 3, 12 attacks. 12 attacks is better than the average of exocrine shots. Unfortunately for probably the exocrine. I don't know what that really says, but it does require you to make melee. You do have to get into melee. But to that end, again, Subterranean Tunnels isn't amazing. It is. It is not an amazing ability anymore. And even when it was okay, people weren't taking it because it was too expensive. But again, as a Trigon sympathizer, uh, on a turn, you deep strike 6 inches, right? You're just priming yourself up for your go turn in Synaptic Nexus. You are now probably more able to put yourself in Synapse range so that if this is the turn where you have 5 up info and pop, that means that your Trigon will probably find better ways to live, right? There will be a chance for it to live. And then on the following turn, you get the +1 to advance and charge or the +1 to hit, whatever you need that turn to make the Trigon do its damage in a blender 140 points. That's a lot of circle managing because I don't know if I can still say that term on YouTube anymore. But that's a lot of hoops to jump through for this. I'm not going to lie to you. But we've experimented with Molochs in this for the one fucking battle shock test, trigger, fail, smothering shadow. We've done bullshit in this detachment. So if there's bullshit to be tried, maybe try on. All right. Past that, Raveners have been seen in list more. Maybe you're not feeling the Trigon. Maybe just squads of Raveners. Deep strike them in, take it +1 to strength and synapse. You give them +1 to hit. Now they're doing what they do, right? They do what they do. They probably scored you some points, and you don't even need to take big bricks of them. You don't have advance and charge, but they're deep striking, so how often were you doing that anyway? All of these things we've seen Raveners. But to that point, something that I found interesting from all the people that were taking Raveners, uh, I've seen a couple of them come to the dark side. Ah, yes, because, once again, Monster will mention the Von Ryan's Leapers. Yes. Uh, I've been looking at list, and, like, one of them, right? Less Raveners, more Von Ryan's Leapers. For Nathaniel's list here. Oh, this wasn't the last time we saw his list. The last time we saw his list was that LVO? It was something big, sorry. But yeah, as you can see, less Raveners from there, more Von Ryan's Leapers. I'm trying to remember. Sorry, it's been a hectic couple of days. Um, trying to remember if it was on this or Best Coach Pairings where I saw the other list that had more VRLs. I think it was Best Coach Pairings for an event while I was trying to see what Tyranids were doing. But to that, people have been trying more Von Ryan's Leapers. So if you can put them up there in Synapse range, fights first, stealth, infiltrators, taking their 6 up invuln to a 5 up invuln, taking their hitting on 3s to hitting on 2s, their strength 5 to strength 6. All of these things, those are some inclusions to be had to try with Synaptic Nexus and see where we get. So, yeah. Uh, do I have a lot of faith that Synaptic Nexus will rise from the ashes back to mediocrity? No. But it is worth discussing that because of the way points have fallen and the things that have happened and what units points have fallen, uh, maybe there's another chance for Synaptic Nexus to finally find its place amongst their detachments this time around. So, yeah, if you like the video, like it. Got a comment from me, comment. And until next time, peace out, my monstrosities.